Welcome back to the gripping saga of Jack and Tien's family. The moment Jack put pen to paper on a multi-billion-dollar deal to change his life, he had no idea he was also signing his beloved wife's death warrant. While the celebratory champagne was being poured, Tien was fading away in a pool of blood on a deserted trail after a brutal ambush. Who is the killer? And why did an ex-mother-in-law show up at that exact moment to do the unthinkable? The truth is about to come out, and the sheer cruelty of their greed will give you chills. Will justice be served while the culprit continues to twist the truth? Hit subscribe and turn on notifications to join Jack and his daughter on their journey to find the truth. As the frantic footsteps of Mrs. Liu and the scarred man faded into the thick brush, the trail fell into a terrifying silence. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was the heavy, haunting silence of an ending. Tien lay there, her face pressed against the cold earth. The smell of damp soil, wild grass, and the sharp metallic sting of blood began to hit her failing senses. In her dazed state, her vision started to tunnel until everything was just a tiny circle of light. Little Anna didn't run away like her mom told her to. The poor thing knelt down, her tiny hands trying to cover the wound on the back of her mother's head. Her soft hands stained crimson. "Mommy, wake up. Stop joking." Anna's scared. The little girl's voice was like a thin rope trying to pull Tien back from the edge of the abyss. Every time she heard her daughter sob, her heart wrenched. She wanted to reach out to hold her child, to tell her, "I'm okay, Mommy's just a little tired." But her body felt like 1,000 pounds of lead. A chilling numbness began to crawl from her spine to the top of her head. Medical experts say that trauma to the occipital region, the back of the head, often leads to a rapid loss of consciousness. Tien felt like her brain was an hourglass running out of sand. Memories began to flicker by like a slow-motion movie. The day she first met Jack at that dusty construction site, the day she gave birth in their old house, where Anna's first cries chased away the looming shadow of poverty. And just this morning, Jack's smile when he talked about the cinnamon wood fence. I can't die yet," Tien pleaded in her mind. She tried to move her fingers, but her muscles remained eerily silent. Meanwhile, not far from the trail, Mrs. Liu was running for her life. She wasn't running out of guilt. She was running from the law. The gold necklace in her pocket felt like it was glowing hot, searing through the thin fabric of her clothes. She stopped by a large tree, gasping for air, her eyes darting back toward the scene. She's probably dead. If she's dead, no one will know. I took this. I'll just pin the whole thing on that hired thug. The selfishness of a former mother-in-law who had tormented her for years flared up again. She didn't think about the life she had just abandoned. She only thought about how to justify keeping the gold. Mrs. Liu pulled out the necklace. Under the dim moonlight, the chain was bent from being ripped off, and a few strands of Tien's hair were still caught in the links. She spat on the ground and wiped a smudge of dried blood off the gold. Any shred of humanity in her had died long ago, buried under years of enabling her deadbeat gambling son. Meanwhile, Jack was tearing down the road, taking sharp turns at breakneck speeds. He had no idea he had just sped right past Mrs. Lu, who was lurking in the shadows of the brush. A husband's and father's intuition told him something was horribly wrong. His headlights swept across the trail, and then his heart nearly stopped. An orange crate lay overturned. Anna's tiny sandal was sitting abandoned in the middle of the road. And there, his wife lay like a wilted flower at the foot of a boulder. Jack slammed on the brakes and dove off the bike. He didn't even turn off the engine. The bike crashed onto its side, the wheels still spinning wildly. Tien! He lunged toward her, his hands shaking so violently he was afraid to touch her. He feared that even the slightest movement would chase away her final breath. Anna, what happened? Who did this to Mommy? Jack roared, his voice cracking. Anna could only point into the darkness. Grandma, she took Mommy's necklace. Mommy fell. There's so much blood. Daddy. Jack saw the bloody scratch on his wife's neck right where their anniversary necklace always hung. A flash of pure hatred burned in his chest, but it was instantly snuffed out by the terrifying fear of losing her. He pressed his ear to Tien's chest. 1 beat, 2 beats, very slow, very weak. Hang on, honey. Don't leave me. I just signed the contract. We're going to be rich. Jack screamed in desperation. He scooped her up, pulling her onto the motorcycle and bracing her against him. He used a scarf to tie her body tightly to his so she wouldn't fall. Anna sat in the front, clinging to the handlebars. The engine roared as they tore through the night. Jack steered with one hand, his other arm reaching back to steady Tien's head, trying to shield her from the jolts of the road. The journey to the hospital felt like an eternity. Every pothole was a painful shudder for both the living and the unconscious. Jack kept talking to his wife, never stopping. Tien, remember the cinnamon tree in front of our house? Next season, I'll harvest the bark for your medicine. Don't you dare go to sleep. Do you hear me? Drifting in and out of consciousness, Tien heard the wind whistling in her ears and the deep, warm vibration of Jack's voice. She wanted to answer, to tell him how cold she was, but her throat felt frozen. She felt Jack's hot tears falling onto her face. Those tears were the only thing giving her the strength to hold on to the fraying thread of life. But the hunt for the killer and the fight for justice had only just begun. Will that necklace in Mrs. Lu's hand become the smoking gun? Or will the silence of the deep woods bury the truth forever? The county hospital at night was so quiet, you could hear a leaky faucet dripping in the bathroom. Jack stood leaning against the peeling plaster wall outside the intensive care unit. He refused to sit. He was afraid that if he sat down, he would completely collapse. Jack pulled the multi-billion-dollar contract from his pocket. One corner was stained with blood, Tien's blood. Just a few hours ago, it was their golden ticket to a better life. Now, under the harsh white neon lights of the hospital, it looked like nothing more than a cruel, mocking death sentence. Is this what put you in there, Tien? Jack crushed the paper in his fist, his fingertips bruised from gripping it so hard. He remembered every little detail, how Tien skipped breakfast so he'd have enough gas money to meet the client, how she wore her oldest tattered jacket just so Anna could have a new warm coat. She had been the one holding the fort for him to build his dreams on her own blood and exhausted strength. His success today had been built on her silent sacrifices. sacrifices he had blindly taken for granted while he was busy chasing numbers. The chief surgeon stepped out, his face etched with exhaustion after the 4-hour operation. He looked at Jack with that heavy, sympathetic gaze medical professionals reserve for the most desperate cases. The patient has fallen into a deep coma. Her Glasgow coma scale is down to a 4. The traumatic brain injury caused a hemorrhage in the internal capsule, directly affecting her motor functions and cognitive nerves. We've done everything we can. Now what she needs is a miracle, or a reason strong enough to pull her back. Jack's ears began to ring. A reason to pull her back was his love, and Anna's crying not enough. He peered through the small glass window of the ICU. Tien lay there motionless. The mechanical ventilator rhythmically forced air into her lungs with a dry, hollow sound. She looked like a broken porcelain doll held together by a web of IV lines. In the dead of night, as Jack sat hunched by the bedside, little Anna startled awake on a makeshift cot. She didn't wail. She just whimpered, her eyes swollen from exhaustion and fear. "Daddy." The old grandma. She took Mommy's necklace. Jack froze. Old grandma. That was how Anna referred to Mrs. Lytucam, the mother of Tien's ex-husband. The jagged pieces of the puzzle began to snap together in Jack's mind with horrifying clarity. Why was Mrs. Lou there? Why her? Rage surged through Jack's veins like an erupting volcano. He remembered the raw, bloody scratch on his wife's neck, right where their 5th anniversary gold necklace always rested. It wasn't just gold. It was Jack's vow to protect her. And a monster had ripped it away while she was dying. "Anna, are you sure? Did you see her clearly? Was it Mrs. Lou?" Jack knelt down, gripping his daughter's shoulders. "Yes, she pushed me. She called me a brat. She pulled the necklace so hard it hurt Mommy. Mommy screamed, 'Ah!' And then she didn't say anything else." Each innocent word from the child felt like a knife twisting in Jack's heart. He understood now. This wasn't just an accident. It was a double crime, the brutality of a debt collector and the bottomless depravity of someone who was once family. Jack stepped out of the room and walked toward the hallway window, staring at the misty mountains where Mrs. Lou lived. His hands, usually accustomed to holding hammers and chisels, were now clenched into tight white fists. He caught his reflection in the hospital restroom mirror. His face was gaunt, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep and pure hatred. But deep in those eyes, a cold resolve was hardening. "Tien, just rest for a little while, okay? I'm going to get you justice. I'll make whoever touched you pay for it for the rest of their life." He pulled out his phone and called an old friend at the county police station. "Hung, I need your help. It's a robbery, and maybe an attempted murder. The killer isn't far away." While Jack prepared for his hunt for justice, the silence at Mrs. Lou's house was also being torn apart. She sat there staring at the necklace on the table. She began to hear strange noises around the house. The wind whistling through the door, cracks sounded like Tien's accusing voice. She didn't realize that the price of that gold necklace wasn't 50 million dong, it was her very soul. Thought. Before leaving the hospital, Jack went back into the ICU one last time. He leaned down and whispered into Tien's ear, the spot where doctors say hearing remains the very last sense to fade in a coma. "Can you hear me? The cinnamon fence smells so good today. I drove the final nail into the gate so no one can ever come in and hurt our family again. I have to go for a little while, but I'll be back. When I return, you have to open your eyes for me. Okay, I'm not finished telling you about our future yet. A single tear rolled down from Tien's closed eyelid. Was it a physical reflex, or was her soul answering him Jack didn't know? But that tear was all the command he needed to move forward. Jack slumped down on the hospital steps and pulled out his phone, the battery nearly dead. His hands were still stained with Tien's dried blood, causing the touchscreen to glitch and skip. He dialed Captain Hung, a childhood friend, now working with the county's criminal investigation unit. Hung, Tien's been hurt. She's in a deep coma. Jack's voice was hoarse, every word feeling like jagged glass, tearing at his throat. The other end went silent for 3 seconds before the rustle of a police uniform followed. "Where are you? I'm coming now." "Who did it?" "Mrs. Lou, her ex-mother-in-law, and a hired thug. They robbed her and left her for dead right in front of little Anna." Jack said, his eyes staring blankly into the pitch-black void toward the hospital gate. "I don't just want to file a report, Hung. I want them to pay. Now." 15 minutes later, a police pickup truck tore through the night sirens, wailing and screeched to a halt in front of the ER entrance. Hung jumped out and saw Jack, a burly carpenter, usually known for his calm, now looking like a wounded animal, eyes bloodshot and breath heavy with pure hatred. "Jack, listen to me," Hung said, gripping his friend's shoulder. "You're the victim here. If you lay a hand on her now, you become the criminal. You still have Anna, and Tien is waiting for you in there. Let the law handle this." Jack let out a faint, cold laugh. "Can the law give my wife her mind back? Can the law erase the trauma in a 4-year-old's head?" Despite his words, Jack led Hung in to see Anna. The child sat huddled on a chair, her eyes fixed on the emblem on Hung's cap. In a trembling voice, Anna recounted every detail: the scar on the man's face, Mrs. Lou's poisonous insults, and the moment she ripped the necklace away, sending her mother flying backward. She told Mommy to just die and get out of her sight. She took the gold Daddy gave Mommy. The child's statement was the final piece of the puzzle. Hung barked orders to his team. "Let's move. Target is Mrs. Lou's house in the next commune. Track down the man with the scar." Jack climbed into the police truck. He couldn't stay at the hospital. He wanted to witness the downfall of the woman who had planted the seeds of misery. The convoy moved silently through the winding village roads. Thick fog obscured the view, much like the truth that had been hidden behind Mrs. Lou's neighborly facade for so long. As they approached her dilapidated shack, Jack saw the dim flicker of an oil lamp through the cracks in the door. Mrs. Lou wasn't asleep. She was sitting there, counting the links on the necklace, muttering to herself as she calculated today's gold prices. She had no idea that the sound of tires grinding on the gravel outside was the sound of death at her door. Crash! The rotting wooden door was kicked open. Jack was the first one in. The police flashlights cut through the room, landing squarely on the table where the gold necklace lay exposed. Mrs. Lou panicked, knocking over a tin box in a desperate attempt to hide the jewelry, but it was too late. Her face went pale, her lips trembling, unable to form a single word. "Mrs. Liu, you're under arrest for robbery and failure to render aid to a person in a life-threatening condition." Hung's voice rang out cold and commanding. Jack stepped forward, looking down at the woman his wife used to call mother-in-law. He didn't strike her. He simply picked up the necklace, wiped the dust off it, and looked her dead in the eye. This chain is worth a bit of gold, but my wife's life and your dignity, what's the price on those? Mrs. Lu collapsed to her knees, wailing hysterically, blaming the debt collector, blaming poverty. But when she saw little Anna standing behind the officers, the child's eyes filled with pure disgust, she suddenly went silent. That was the ultimate punishment, the judgment in the eyes of a child. Based on Mrs. Lu's confession, the police quickly tracked the debt collector to a front for a karaoke bar on the edge of the forest. The chase through the cinnamon woods was breathtaking. Jack ran alongside the officers, his strength as a carpenter allowing him to bolt through the brush like a predator. Just as the scarred man tried to dive into a stream to escape, Jack lunged like an arrow. He tackled him into the mud. The instinct to finish the man took over, and Jack pulled back a heavy fist. But in that split second, an image of Tien smiling in the sunlight flashed before him. She was a gentle soul. She would never want his hands stained with blood. Jack let go. He hauled the man up and shoved him toward Hung. Take him. I need to get back to my wife. By the time Jack returned to the hospital, the first light of dawn was breaking, shining brightly through the ICU window. He sat by the bed and placed the gold necklace into Tien's open palm. He took her hand in his, trying to transfer his own warmth into her cold body. Tien, I got it back for you. They're caught. The contract is signed. Now the only thing left is for you to wake up. Suddenly, Tien's finger twitched. It was a tiny movement like the flutter of a butterfly's wing. But to Jack, it was a seismic shift of joy. The heart monitor began to beat faster. Jack held his breath. He saw her eyelids flutter. Tears slowly began to seep from the corners of her closed eyes. She heard him. She was fighting her way back. Justice had been served out there, and here in this room, the other half-life was being reborn. Jack knew the storm had passed. From now on, the cinnamon fence would only smell of peace. In the interrogation room at the station, the sterile white fluorescent lights beat down on Mrs. Lu's wrinkled face. Captain Hung sat across from her with a thick file. Jack sat behind the one-way mirror, his bloodshot eyes fixed on every move made by the woman who had nearly cost his wife her life. Mrs. Lu wasn't screaming like she was when they caught her. She sat huddled, her thin, bony hands interlaced and trembling uncontrollably. When Hung placed the gold necklace on the table, she didn't flinch. Instead, she started to tear up the tears of a world-class actress. Officer, please, I'm innocent. I was coming home from the market and found Tien lying there. I only meant to help her. That necklace, she took it off herself and gave it to me. She told me, take this and look after your son, save us. I'm an old woman. Why would I be greedy for a little gold from a dying person? Hung slammed his hand onto the table, the sound cracking through the room like a gunshot. Lies. A person in a deep coma with their skull cracked against a rock and bleeding out does not stay conscious enough to unfasten a necklace and hand it to you. Furthermore, the victim has deep lacerations on her neck. Forensic experts confirmed those were caused by a violent external rip. Mrs. Lu kept shaking her head frantically, her lips quivering. It must have happened when I tried to lift her up. I was clumsy. I must have scratched her. I swear to God, I only had good intentions. Behind the glass, Jack's fists were clenched so tight, his fingernails dug deep into his palms. He couldn't believe this woman could shamelessly flip the truth like that. Inside the interrogation room, Mrs. Lu switched to her sob story. She brought up the days Tien lived as her daughter-in-law, claiming she had raised and cared for her, despite actually exploiting her labor for years. She's my former daughter-in-law. There's still some bond there. When I saw her fall, I panicked. I took the gold to go find help, and next thing I know, you're arresting me. Hung sneered, bringing out an even sharper piece of evidence. Then why didn't you call for an ambulance immediately? Why did you run away with a hired thug? And why did you hide the necklace in a tin box under your bed instead of bringing it to the hospital? Mrs. Lu went silent for a second, then started her panic routine again. I was scared. I was afraid people would say I killed her, so I hid it. Look at me, officer. I'm an old lady. Where would I get the nerve to do something so evil? Realizing logic wouldn't break, her hung decided to use a move that was as effective as it was heartbreaking. He signaled his partner to bring little Anna into an observation room where she could see Mrs. Lu through a cracked door. Jack held Anna in his arms. He didn't want her to see this, but it was the only way to unmask the monster. Anna, look. Is the person in that room the one who pushed Mommy and took the necklace? Anna looked through the gap and began to shake. She clung to Jack's neck, sobbing hysterically. Daddy, it's her. It's her. She pulled the necklace and hurt Mommy. She told Mommy to die. Daddy, make her go away. I'm scared. The child's cries were broadcast through the speakers directly into the interrogation room. Mrs. Lu froze. For a moment, her face turned a ghostly gray. A heavy silence filled the air. Hung looked her dead in the eye. Do you hear that? That's the voice of a 4-year-old. She saw everything. You can lie to me, and you can try to trick the law with your twisted words, but you can't lie to that little girl's soul. And you certainly can't lie to God. Leaving the station, Jack headed back to the hospital with a heavy heart. He realized that no matter how many years Mrs. Lu got in prison, the pain in Tien's heart and the trauma in Anna's mind would remain. He sat by the bed, watching Tien still lost in her long sleep. He took her hand and whispered, Tien, she still won't admit it. But you know what? The whole world knows you're the good one and she's the monster. I won't let hatred eat away at my life anymore. I'm going to focus on you and our daughter. That's the best revenge against people who wanted to see us fall. By this time, Jack had signed a fresh copy of the multi-billion-dollar contract. Money began flowing into his account, covering all the medical expenses. Jack hired the top specialists and bought the best medications available. He used the very life-changing wealth that the villains had tried to steal to save his wife's life, while Mrs. Lu sat in a holding cell awaiting trial. A miracle occurred at the hospital. One late afternoon, as Anna sat by the bedside reading The 3 Little Pigs to her mother, Tien's fingers actually clenched. This time, it wasn't just a reflex. She had actually reached out and grasped her daughter's hand. Tien's eyes slowly opened. Though her gaze was still hazy and weak, she saw Jack. "Jack! Anna!" Her voice was as thin as a wisp of smoke. Jack collapsed by the bed, tears pouring down his face. "I'm here. You're awake? It's over." "Tien, it's all over." Justice had finally been served. In the most beautiful way possible, the wicked were imprisoned by their own isolation and stubbornness, while the good were reborn in the loving arms of their family. Mrs. Liu might never admit her guilt in court, but for the rest of her life, behind cold stone walls, she would be haunted by the image of a crying child and Tien's bloodshot eyes in every single dream.